Good morning, everybody. First class of the quarter for winter. Is that too loud, too low? To me, it sounds like it's blasting. Okay. All right, well, very first thing, we've been through a lot this week, so let's just begin our class with prayer, okay? Get our minds back into what we're here for. So if you go with me. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this morning that you've given us, that you've allowed us to be here, that you've watched over us and kept us safe. Lord, through the traumatic things that have happened this past week, not including just weather, but the earthquake, we know many people have been afraid. They've lost possessions, and it's scared a lot of us. Lord, we ask that during these times we can trust in you, put our heart and our eyes to you, and remember that you are there for us. Lord, we thank you so much for your love, for taking care of us. We ask, Lord, that through the upcoming week, the aftershocks or whatever else may happen, that you'll just help us and ease our fears, our anxieties. We know that some of our brothers and sisters have lost their homes. Things of theirs have been damaged. We ask, Lord, that you'll give them comfort, that you'll watch over them, guide them through the process, whatever may happen and unfold in the future for them. Lord, we ask that this morning in class, that right now we can focus on your word, that you'll open our hearts and minds, that we can dive deep into it, to have questions, to have answers, just to help us to study more in your word. We thank you so much, Lord, and we love you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so just real quickly, the church building is still standing. That's a good thing. There's been a little bit of damage, not structural or anything. It's just mostly cosmetic and sheetrock and tiles and ceiling and classrooms. A lot of people came yesterday and cleaned up. I really want to thank those people, the unsung servants of the congregation that come and just work because they see a need. If you ever feel that you want to serve but you really don't want any limelight or anything like that, please put yourself out there. There's so much to do that you can just show up and do, whether it's helping clean something, straighten something, or just those that are here working could use some help sometimes. So always be open to that. Okay, this morning we're going into Joshua, the book of Joshua, and while we're only going to be in chapter 1 for this class period, we're going to actually back up quite a bit. And the very first thing I want us to ask is, who is Joshua? Now, in that question, what we really want to ask is, who is Hoshea? Because that was his original name. We first see him when the Jews have left Egypt and they are traveling. They're not even to the mount yet. They don't even have the 10 Commandments yet, but they're traveling. And they are being attacked. Because imagine a large group of people, okay? So put your mindset way back thousands of years ago. A large group of people that are traveling through what we would say is wilderness. There are no known paved roads or anything. They're just getting out of the situation they were in. Moses is leading them, and so they're following him, but probably the group of people themselves don't know where they're going. They're just following. Okay? But because they're, we'll say, a ragtag group, they've just left slavery. They don't really have an army. They have no way of protecting themselves, other than what they could grab as they're leaving or make as they're moving. Okay, they're whatever they could find on the way, or maybe even purchase from other communities that they pass by. So they as a nation, they really don't have much. But they're being attacked by other, well, I wouldn't say nations, I'd say other cities, other governmental agencies. The Amalekites at this time are coming after them. And they're picking at them at the edges because that's the easy part. They don't have to attack the full group. They just get to the edges. And you got to imagine this is a large group. I mean, I'm not talking, 6 or 7 miles. And the number of people we're talking about, they're going to be spread out quite a bit and moving en masse. So it's real easy to come in there and just attack the weaker parts and pick off possessions, to kill people, to take what they have, maybe take slaves, these kind of things. So, as a good leader, Moses has to first say, I got to protect my people. So he picks Hoshea. Now in our Bibles, when we see this unfolding, we're going to see it as Joshua. And we learn more about Joshua and his name change later. It's not really a huge thing. We're going to see it as Joshua, and then later we're going to see when Moses, he's introduced as Hoshea, but Moses calls him Joshua. Okay, and the name has some meaning. Hoshea means desire for salvation. Okay, now I like what that means. Desire for salvation. What does your name mean? Do we even know? Many times we don't. All right, but if you dig deep, you can usually find some kind of root meaning for your name. Okay, so Hoshea is desire for salvation. Later on, when we see the verses in Numbers chapter 13, verse 16, all right, we don't have a PowerPoint, so if you're taking notes, write down these verses if you want to, so you can go back and look at them later. Numbers chapter 13, verses 16, we see the name change. At that time is when they are actually sending the spies into the promised land to start looking and reconnaissance and all. And Hoshea, who Moses called Joshua, is one of those that are picked. Joshua means the Lord is salvation. Now I kind of like that change. He goes from desire for salvation to the Lord is salvation. I wish all our names actually had meanings like that. Okay, so who was Joshua? Well, first off, we see him as a warrior leader. At the time when the Amalekites are coming and picking the edges of the Jews, Moses picks Joshua. We'll stick with Joshua for now, okay? Picks Joshua. He says, Joshua, I want you to gather up men and go protect us. All right, so this is probably a fairly young man at that time. And so he has to gather up a ragtag group of people that have no real weapons. They've probably got tools. They brought all their stuff with them, but no real weapons, right? And they have to go and defeat the Amalekites, and they successfully do so. All right, they're protecting the people. So we see Joshua first off as a warrior leader. And we see that in Exodus chapter 17, verses 9 through 14, and I'll just read that real quick. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to apologize first of all because as we go through this class, I'm terrible at pronunciation of names and places, and I wouldn't expect any better from you. Okay? When I taught 6th grade, I used to tell them the same thing. I don't care how you pronounce it. Just give it a whirl and a try, and then we'll move on. Okay? So forgive my pronunciation. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. So while we see in these verses they sent out Joshua, and some of the credit's given to him because it was by his sword. But we also see that it wasn't just because of Joshua. It was because of God. God at that time was also protecting his people through his powers, through Moses, using Moses. Can you imagine Moses standing on top of a hill with his arms raised? Oh, that's a killer. Okay? And holding a staff. And getting so tired that people are there holding up for him. Rolling a big rock there just so he can sit down. But Joshua is out there actually fighting. So he's getting experience. Later on, we see Joshua as Moses' assistant. Okay, now I would love to have assistants. That'd be great for me. I'm more like my wife's assistant. I help her with whatever she tells me to do. All right, but so Joshua is helping Moses as an assistant, and what's he doing? Well, the very next thing we see him doing is they're going to the mountain. You know, this is the face-to-face with God, Moses going to the mountain. We know that he's going to receive the 10 Commandments, and he's going to face God, and God's going to impart this knowledge and wisdom to him. Okay? Now, we don't see Joshua actually going up on the mountain with them. It just says he's going to the mountain. So he's accompanying him. And then in Exodus chapter 32, verse 17, after Moses has been on the mountain, he's come down, he's back with Joshua again. Joshua is traveling on with him. They're going back to camp, and Joshua hears something. He hears noise, and he's not quite sure what it is, but it's described as revelry in some versions. Now, revelry, we usually think of party or loud, joyful, you know. But I think most of us realized what they were doing back at camp. This was the time when the people, after 40 days, you know, they had lost faith. In just over a month, they had gone from being positive, you know, the Lord has saved us, to, oh no, we're stuck out here in the middle of nowhere, and we can't see God, we can't touch God, so let's make a golden calf. They've gone straight into idol worship. And so while they're participating in that, that's what Joshua is hearing. Okay? So, we know what happens once they get back to camp. But we're going to skip over that because that's not a part of the Joshua lesson that we're going to dwell on right now. We also see Joshua as a spy. Okay, so we've seen him as a warrior leader, an assistant, and a spy. So as I mentioned, this is actually when we see the name change. They have arrived at the promised land. The promised land that God has said, I am going to give you. They're right there by the border, and Moses, being a leader, says, we've got to send some people in there, and we want to check it out. We want to see what forces are going to be against us. Because in Moses' mind, he's like, God's got this. But it would be good to know what we're going to be up against. Okay? So he sends in one from each tribe. And from the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun. Okay, the verse goes on later to state that Hoshea, who Moses called Joshua. So, they go in, they spy out the land, they come back, and 10 of the 12 are negative. We can't do this. This is terrible. Oh no, we're going to die. All right? But 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, say, no, we got this. We got God. Okay? Can you imagine the faith after all they've come back with a report saying, the fruit is humongous. It's a fertile land and all. But the other 10 are going, no, the people are huge and they have these armies and we'll never defeat them. But Joshua and Caleb go against the other 10 and say, no, we can do this. Okay? But the people, as we know, listen to the 10. They listen, they go, oh no, they said, we can't do it. We're going to be doomed. We're all going to die. Okay? Again, their faith in God has wavered because of a negative report. How many times do we even listen to the negative of the world around us? All right, and I admit, even for myself, it's very hard when you got so much negative influence coming in, whether it's at work or TV or radio or internet or all these media outlets. We're being thrown negativeness all the time. When as Christians, what we really should be doing is looking at the positive aspect of God. God's going to get me through this. Now, just a side note here, okay? Sometimes we say, well, yeah, I can put my trust in God and he'll get me through this. I just don't know how, It's going to be okay. Go back to the story of the men thrown into the fiery furnace, okay? The trust they had. I really wish I had trust that strong, because they said, well, we will trust God to save us. And if he doesn't, that's okay. We still have belief in him. We know he's going to take care of us. Because they knew that even if they perished in that fire, there was something better. Now, don't we as Christians have that? Shouldn't we have that same thought? That even if my life ends right now, I've got something better, because this really isn't my home. My home is with God, and that's what I'm striving for. That's what I'm continuing to look towards. That's the positiveness that I want to have every day. So many of us give up at the negative stuff that's thrown at us, but we forget that we're only here for a very short time, really. Okay? We have to look to what's next. All right, back to Joshua here. So, we've seen him as a warrior leader, an assistant, a spy, and then we see him next as a real leader. Okay, in Numbers chapter 27, for verses 18 through 20. So the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and you shall commission him in their sight. You shall invest him with some of your authority, that all the congregation of the people of Israel may obey." Joshua is now being set up as a leader of the people. Okay? He's even more. So God has told Moses, give him some of your authority. In other words, build him up as a leader. I've got plans for him. Okay, this isn't just, you need some help, okay, pick that guy over there. We see how God is orchestrating this because he has plans for Joshua. He's got a lot of experience. He knows how to fight. He knows how to strategize. He knows how to be a leader. He knows how to look for the positive things. Okay, being a spy wasn't about being sneaky. Really what it was about was putting his faith in God. Okay, and because of that, God looks favorably on him. So he is the one that's going to be trained as the next leader. Can you imagine being trained as the next leader for an entire nation? It's actually kind of scary when you even think about our leaders now for our nation as the U.S. Many of these men have job experiences and such, but we elect them. We as a group haven't trained them for that position. We've elected them. Imagine God picking somebody and saying, I want him, and I'm going to make sure he's able to lead. Then as we get into Deuteronomy. So what is Deuteronomy really? That's the final words of Moses. That's Moses. He knows he's going to die. Okay, he's did something that displeased God. And God said, you are not going to cross into the promised land. Well, lo and behold, at this time, the nation of Israel has arrived at the Jordan there, or close to it. They're ready to get, they can almost see the promised land right there. The time's come upon them. Okay? But Moses knows he's not going to go across. So what does he do? Moses loves these people. We've seen times when he's been angry at them. He's even been angry with God, saying, why did you tell me to lead these people, these ungrateful people? Okay, I think we all can relate to that. We all have moments of that even in our own life. All right? That's being human. Moses was human, and he had these times. But now he knows he's not going across because of what he did. And he is talking to the nation of Israel because he loves them. He wants to remind them. You know, I remember when my kids were younger, before they would go out somewhere, I would sit there and I would go through all the rules again. Okay, did you get your backpack? Do you have all your stuff? You got your money? You got your driver's license? Okay, and you need to be home by this certain time. And if you're going to be late, I want you to call me. All of those things because I love them. I'm trying to train them to think about these things. Moses is doing exactly the same thing. He's trying one more time to poke them and say, remember God. Remember everything we've been through. Remember all the laws so that you can please God. Then at the very end, in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 7, he says something that really struck me. And we're going to see it a couple times. And so I want you to keep it in mind for yourself. Be strong and courageous. Can we do that as Christians today? Should we be strong and courageous in facing the world? Okay, not only just happenstance of life, but in our everyday attitude, that attitude that you have inside you. You need to be strong and courageous. Now, we all have different levels of that, don't we? Sometimes we're pretty weak, sometimes we're fearful, anxious, but that's also why we have a family here. That's to help each other, support each other, so that if you're having a weak moment, then your brother or sister can be there to prop you up. Okay, many times we need to ask for help. Too many times we hide these things, but don't be afraid to even ask for help. Okay, because really what you're doing is you're asking for help, but you're also asking God for help. Okay, and that's what the family is for. So, as we get closer here to the actual book of Joshua, Joshua knows he's next in line. Moses is going to be gone, and this whole nation is going to be looking to him. So moving into Joshua, the very first thing we see is God talking directly to Joshua. Okay, not the whole group or anything. He's talking to Joshua. Can you imagine God picking you out and saying, okay, I want to talk to you. And to be supported and just to feel like you had all that support. I mean, have you ever in your life felt completely supported in what you were about to do? This task that was monumental. You were going to lead millions of people. Okay, through a journey. They didn't have houses and transportation and all. They were on their own out there in the desert, providing for themselves with God's help. Okay, let's put that in there, with God's help. But he was going to lead them into a land knowing that it wasn't going to be given to them freely. They were going to have to fight for it. Okay? People were going to die. That's a heavy responsibility on a leader. And Joshua knows that. But now he knows that as God's talking to him, that he's going to have his full support. So before we actually get into what God told him, what's the purpose of Joshua? Well, so Joshua was approximately 85 years old when he succeeded Moses. Can you imagine being an 80 or 85-year-old man taking on the mantle of leadership? And not only taking on that responsibility, but you're also going to be walking into a strange land. You're going to be with your generals and your army, helping them to strategize and fight. I mean, I have a hard time imagining that myself, because even as 56 years old, sometimes I go, oh, I'm so tired. and that's usually just me complaining. Okay? But at his age, he is taking on all that and doing that. Moses was even older and still doing it. That's got to show you how much God was supporting them, even physically. Okay, but the real purpose of Joshua, the book, as we're going to see, is it is to fulfill the promise that God made. The promise he made not to this group of people, but over 440 years earlier, he made this promise to Abraham. Okay, we're going way back in time now. He made this promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verses 12 through 51. So if you're making notes, write that down. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Okay, so he's sleeping, he's dreaming. And many times that's how God talked to people. Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. Promised land? I think we're there now. And will be servants there. Well, let me back up. Egypt. So they're going to be in Egypt. They're going to be servants there. They're slaves. What actually happened there was they started as servants. Okay, they started as servants because jobs and such is a way to support themselves. And then the pharaohs in Egypt said, there's too many of you. We're going to enslave you so that you don't overcome us. Okay, you got to remember that as you're reading this verse. Sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, Egypt. Okay, keep that in mind. And afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Do you remember when they left Egypt? They took everything. People were giving them everything. They were open to it. Yes, here, take it all. All right. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun has gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. That's the promise that God had made to him. Okay? Previously he had told him that his offspring were going to be numbered like the stars. Too many to count. All right? Now, we see that continuing on, but he said, I'm going to lead them to a promised land. It doesn't say promised land here, but that's the context of these verses. I'm going to take them through a whole journey. And he outlines it pretty well that we can connect it to later verses. Okay? As slaves in Egypt, starting out as servants in a strange land, being enslaved, and then being freed, then his judgment coming upon Egypt, and then as they are leaving, taking all the possessions with them. So as I mentioned, they really didn't have an army. They didn't have the the weapons and all, but they had a lot of gold, jewelry, a lot of stuff that they could trade and barter. Many times we have this picture that they're traveling through the wilderness and there's nothing there. It's just sand everywhere. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid, that's what the picture I always had, that they were just going over dune after dune and there's nothing there. But what we really need to keep in mind is that there were communities all throughout there. There were places that had water, there were places that had fortresses, there were cities, communities, and they were passing by these places. So they still had the opportunity to barter and change. You know, it wasn't really a money system. It was, I'll give you so much of the gold I have in exchange for spices or cloth or maybe some weapons. You know, that's a good-looking sword right there. I think I could probably use that. I've got some extra jewels here. Okay, these are things we have to keep in mind that are happening at this time. Okay, so we're getting into the actual book of Joshua. So if you want to open up to Joshua chapter 1, we're going to read the very first part. And this is God talking to Joshua. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness in this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Be strong and courageous. What I really want is God to say those things for me. That's what I want to feel myself today. We face so many battles in our everyday life. And as we read God's word, we can take out of it for us to be strong and courageous. He says it many times. He's saying it to the leaders there, and we're going to hear it in the next part. So he's telling them, you need to follow all the laws I've given you. Don't depart to the left or the right, which means you better be right down the middle. It's a very fine line. Or, okay, now he doesn't say, or it's going to be a disaster. He says, he goes the positive route. If you follow my word, if you follow what I've told you, if you walk this fine line, you are going to be prosperous. Okay? You are going to be blessed. And we go on into the next part. So now he's going to be taking command, and Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. It has been hundreds of years in a time of exile, in a time of slavery. They've been wandering the desert for 40 years, and now he tells them, in 3 days, you have 3 days to get ready. Okay? Now, I can see some rushing happening, some running, people throwing their hands up there going, what are we going to do? His leaders that he's depending on, he's telling them, go through the camps, start telling everybody, get them ready. 3 days, you have 3 days to get ready, and we are marching into the promised land. All right? So they're not only having to get ready for, get their food, their tent, their clothing, their children, their livestock. Okay? You got to keep in mind, all these things are with them at this time. But they also have to start preparing to fight, because they are going into a land to conquer it. So their soldiers are also going to be fighting. Now, let's see here. And to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, okay, I'm going to stop right there. So these 2.5 tribes, previously, we need to remember that they had come across a land that they loved. They got into a land, they defeated the people, and they looked around and said, why can't we have this? This is perfect for us. We could just stay right here. So, after talking about it, Moses agreed, God agreed, but there was one caveat. There was one condition. You will continue to go with your brothers into the promised land and fight with them. Nobody gets all the land until we have conquered it all, and then you can go back. Remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest, and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them. Okay? So the women, children, and livestock get to stay in that previous land. But the men that can fight, that's what it means when he says valor. He doesn't mean the 105-year-old guy that's, tromping along. He doesn't mean, the 12-year-old boy that's left at home. Those that can fight, men of valor, are going with the rest of the tribes. Until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you, and they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession and shall possess it, the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. Okay, so he's laid out the conditions here. We're going to war. And you guys, if you'll remember, part of the deal here was you're going to be with us. We're all going into this together. We are the nation of Israel. There's not just a part of us, it's all of us. Okay? This last part I really like, and it's going to be the end of the lesson here. So we've seen God talk to Joshua. And then we've seen Joshua talk to the people. But now the people answer back. And I really like what they say too, because we're going to see that phrase again, be strong and courageous. So God has told this to Joshua. Now the people answer back. They say, and they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. That's total commitment right there. That is trust in a leader. Joshua has been well established. Okay? Or a better way of saying it is God has orchestrated a plan to put Joshua in place as a solid leader that the people can trust. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. This is the people giving their support right back to Joshua, saying, we're in this. We're with you. We will obey you. Then verse 18. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him shall be put to death. That's pretty final, isn't it? You have our 100% obedience. And if somebody does not obey, then they're going to be put to death. Now, that's pretty final. Okay? But that also coincides with God's law. If you disobeyed God, you were put to death. Okay? Even today as Christians, we still face the same thing. You may not be physically put to death, but you are spiritually going to be put to death. If you're not walking that line, not to the right, not to the left, but right down that line, if you fail, you can be put to spiritually death. And then what they tell them, the very last thing there, and they're telling this to Joshua, their leader. Only be strong and courageous. Okay? That's what we want in a leader. We want you to be strong and courageous. God has told them that. They're telling Joshua that again. Strong and courageous. Moses has told Joshua that same phrase. Be strong and courageous. Okay? That's something we need to actually take maybe as a guideline every day. Maybe even in our prayers, we could ask God to help us be strong and courageous in what we face. Are we going to fail? Yes. Okay? We know that. But we can get right back up and keep going. Put on the cloak again, shake the dust off, get back up, and continue to be strong and courageous. Okay, that's end of class. Next week, homework, chapter 2. Read through it. It's all a very quick read. We do have a few study guides for those that do want them. I will tell you right now, I don't follow them very well. Okay? But they are great for taking home, looking through, getting a lot of knowledge out of here. So if you want them, we still have a few left. All right, I'm going to set them up here on the front, and before worship, I'll put them back in the offices. Good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get ready for worship.